On my left, but only physically, is Christopher Hitchens, whose newly published book, God is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything, is the occasion for our gathering tonight. And let me say that not only is it the top nonfiction seller on Amazon.com as of this morning, but it will debut at number 3 on the New York Times bestseller list on Sunday. A fervid atheist, as he was described in yesterday's Times book review by Michael Kinsley, Mr. Hitchens is a native of Portsmouth, England, a graduate of Oxford, and as of April 13th of this year, his birthday, not insignificantly, a naturalized citizen of these United States. He is a, let's give him a hand for that. He is a contributing editor to Vanity Fair magazine, where he writes a regular column that just 2 weeks ago was awarded the magazine industry's version of the Pulitzer Prize. And he writes regularly for Slate and the Atlantic Monthly. He is the author of numerous books, including Letters to a Young Contrarian, Why Orwell Matters, and The Trial of Henry Kissinger. He is also a visiting professor of liberal studies at the New School for Social Research in New York.
The thing I do like about Judaism is something that you haven't, in fact, chosen to stress, which is it does in some ways constitute, I would not say a partnership with God, but a willingness to rebel against him. That's different from Christianity and Islam. I mean, there's it's Rabbi Eliezer, I think, the debate about who's right about this question of the law, and he says, if I'm wrong, you know the story, let the river flow backwards, let the carob tree walk on its roots, let the roof of the temple fall in, and all these things happen. He still won't give up. He said, okay, if I'm wrong, let God say that I'm wrong. And God leans in and said, actually, you are wrong. You've been wrong all along. And Rabbi Eliezer says, well, not even God can decide this, because it's a matter of the law and of the majority in this meeting. And Elisha is supposed to have been asked later on, what did God think about all that? And he thought, well, it means the Jews are a bit more promising than some other groups of people I know. This is very nice, but don't you think it's a little bit anthropomorphic? Doesn't it suggest that we make God in our own image rather than the other way around? And wasn't that my point to begin with?
Well, first...
No moral person, I say, would show contempt and disgust about the female birth canal, as all religions invariably do, and about activities related to it, I may say, in both directions. Revulsion from it, disgust from it, scorn for it, and for all other forms of sexual congress. There seems to be a dread underlying all of this, a dread about the genitalia, a horror of women, a horror of their monthly effusions, a disgust, as I say, for their vaginas, that I don't find healthy. But that seems to me, in two senses, man-made. One, mammal-made, and two, made so that men can subordinate women, which seems to be a consistent finding in all religions. You will know that the pious Jew has to begin every day saying, God is to be thanked for not making me a woman or a Gentile. That's not moral preaching. No one goes around talking nonsense like that unless they think they have divine permission for it. Religion is therefore, yes, a poison, because it spoils even righteous acts. Now, I don't blame you for not reading all my book, and I certainly don't blame you for not quoting all of it. And by the way, we will just have to have a wager on what you said in yours, and I'll stand to my part of it. But I do spend a bit of time on this question of virtue. When a Muslim cab driver, who found a great deal of my money and my wife's money on the backseat of his taxi, and knew very well he could have kept it, we had no means of finding him, went to the trouble he did to bring it back and give it to us and say, well, that's his Muslim duty, wouldn't even accept when I tried to give him 10%, because I knew probably that would be an insult. Really didn't, because it was his Muslim duty. First, I want to make 2 points. One is, I think that's trying to prove too much. I don't think it's at all to the credit of the Prophet Muhammad, or the Quran, or the Archangel Gabriel, who dictated the nonsense of the Quran to him, that this happens. I think the guy should have done what I would do. You find someone else's money, you take it back to him. If you want to be thought of as a moral person, you just do that. You've done the right thing, it's enough. What is this saying? It's a religious duty. It seems to me to pollute the integrity of the thing. The second is, if you use that to prove that Islam is a good influence, you'll have a lot of work still ahead of you. A great deal of work. All your work is still to come, as it is in your invocations of charity and philanthropy. You've proved absolutely nothing at all. You haven't even suggested a defense of religion as a moral or ethical thing. I think that's all I need to say for now.
Okay.
Thank you.
What's wrong with a moderate religion? What's wrong with, say, liberal Judaism, which doesn't see, it doesn't see the scriptures as divinely written?
The main thing that's wrong with it is that it doesn't give me enough to argue with. And that there's something, and that I have to tell you this, I find there's something a little bit cowardly about it, and evasive. The night before I first debated Rabbi Walker in New York, I was debating with Douglas Wilson of Christianity Today, who's invited me onto his website. We produced a book together. We've done a little dog and pony show together. And I was mentioning how religion makes people behave worse. And I gave, as my example, one of the Old Testament commandment to exterminate the children of Amalek, down to the last one. And the only way you can incur the disapproval of the divinity is by leaving one child alive. A very stern disapproval, too, if you don't absolutely complete the extirpation. And Douglas, who's the rector of a big church in Moscow, Idaho, and a very important figure in Calvinist circles, says, well, yeah, but that commandment is absolutely valid. I take it very seriously, he said. If I could find an Amalekite, I'd be absolutely sure to rob him out, and down to the last kid. Now, then I know that here's someone who really thinks that these books are the Word of God. If I run into someone who says they may or may not be the Word of God, I like some bits about them, some bits are okay, make people behave more thoroughly, some bits not, well, we discard those bits. I begin to feel that there's something, well, a little morally slushy going on. It's like what the Catholics call the cafeteria Catholic, or the cafe Christian, the a la carte Christian. Yeah, well, I don't like the bit that says, I've got to stone adulterers, but I do quite like the bit that says, come on. Is this stuff divine revelation or not? Has God revealed himself to us or not? Do we owe God a duty or not? Is morality what we think of as human solidarity ethics, or is it doing God's will? These questions demand answers. And I'm just not impressed by people who say we can have it any which way we like. That's hedonism, not religion. But for these people, a double problem arises. There is first the difficulty of, if not the impossibility, of demonstrating the existence of any creator or designer at all. I think I say something uncontroversial when I say that no theologian has ever conclusively demonstrated that such a designer can or does or ever has existed. The most you can do, by way of the argument from design, is to infer him or her or it from an apparent harmony in the arrangements. And this was at a time when that was the very best that, so to speak, could be done. But religion goes a little further than this already rather impossible task and expects us to believe as follows: that the speaker not only can prove the existence of the said entity, but can claim to know this entity's mind. In fact, can claim to know it quite intimately, can claim to know his or her personal wishes, can in turn tell you what you may do in his name. A quite large arrogation of power, you will suddenly notice, is being granted to the speaker here. The speaker can tell you that he knows. He cannot tell you how, but he can tell you that he knows, for example, that heaven hates ham, that God doesn't want you to eat pork products. He can tell you that God has a very, very strong view about with whom you may have sexual relations, indeed, how you may have sexual relations with others. He can indicate, perhaps a little less convincingly, but no less firmly, that there are certain books or courses of study that you might want to avoid or treat with great suspicion. Now, this suggests to me already a design. I think I can see a design shaping up here, and I think I can see who designed it and created it. I think it was man-made. I think the whole inference, because you can certainly see a design at work, is that this is human, that it was designed at a time of great distress and great ignorance, and that it had an enormous advantage, the design of which can be inferred from every one of its practices. It gives to people, ministers, priests, rabbis, shamans, whoever's cell phone that is should know that we know where you live, by the way, and where your children go to school. It gives to those people power in the here and now, the only place where it really counts. If you are His Holiness the Pope and you have arrogated to yourself, for example, the power to bind and to loose, and to decide who may read what, and how many tithes must be paid, and how many holy days must be observed, how many disciplines must be followed, are you seeking power in the hereafter, or are you seeking it now? It seems to me very obvious that, inescapable conclusion, that it's temporal power that's being talked about. And of a very dictatorial kind, I might add, an absolutist kind, a kind that is not open to the ordinary challenges. The divine right of kings was something you had to challenge not just at the risk of your life, which might end quickly, though the end itself would be slow and painful. The end would be final, but you were told you risked your immortal soul and the rest of your life too. That's quite a powerful instrument of secular discipline. And everyone can name their favorite example, I think, of how and where that kind of tyranny over the minds as well as the bodies of men was exerted. We think of it as belonging to our prehistory, but we only have to look as far as today's Iran, for example, to see a classic theocracy, a country from which I've recently returned, where I wondered how to convey sometimes the flavor of what theocracy really is like. Well, if you're a woman who gets in trouble with the regime and has committed a capital offense in Iran, but you're underage, you're a virgin, you may not be sentenced to death under the law of Iran because the law forbids the execution of virgins. But you may be raped by the Revolutionary Guards so that you're no longer a virgin in the prison and then executed. I think that sort of conveys what people feel they're allowed to do when they think they have God on their side. And I could tell you far worse than that about what the arrogance of power is when it thinks it's backed by the divine.
Well, a slightly low blow to kick off with, Jinesh, I must say. You didn't use your time to prove God's existence either. I think, and I think you'd have needed more time than I would if that's what we were here to debate. I imagine that it was held in common between us and this audience that it isn't possible to decide these matters finally, that no one has ever produced an ontological proof of God that is completely satisfying, nor a disproof that is completely satisfying. However, the burden surely is a little more heavy on those who say, I know that there is a God, and not only am I a deist, I'm a theist, I know what he wants. In fact, I know who his son is. In fact, I'm on sort of personal terms with the guy in ways that are not evident to you. That demands a slightly higher standard of proof, and to say you didn't come up to that scratch, my dear, I'm sorry, is to say the least of it, okay? Now,
Nietzsche is supposed to have said God was dead. Freud is supposed to have said God was dad. In the future of an illusion, his best essay on the subject, I think, he says that it's impossible to study religion without noticing its connection to wishful thinking. That people would like, as they expire, to think, I'm not going anywhere, I'm just going into the arms of a loving father. Yeah, who wouldn't like to believe that? Who here decides what they believe on the basis of their wish, though, may I inquire? Do any of you decide to believe things because they would console you? What about a word like, hasn't come up yet in our discussion, big, interesting, important word, begins with E, evidence. All the evidence is that the cosmos doesn't know we're here, that evolution doesn't know it's created us, that the stars don't look down on us, that there is no one who knows about or cares about or supervises our existence, that we have to face this on our own responsibility. That all the evidence is that way. There is no serious evidence any other way, but there is a strong desire that we could abolish and dissolve our responsibility and just relax and say, well, I'm so glad that as I check out, Daddy will be taking care of me.
I've got some evidence.
I don't think it's moral to be preaching that kind of thing. I'm sorry to say, and I think it's positively immoral to be preaching it to people who are ill, suffering, and defenseless. I think it's hateful to tell lies to people who are in that condition.
What would you tell them?
I would not encourage them to delude themselves.
Oh, I just want to say,
when my turn comes, I won't listen to any rubbish of that kind.
I want you to. Oh, go ahead.
I could not possibly be more serious about it.
You